Welcome. Please rise in body or spirit and join me in singing. Gather the Spirit, harvest the power. Our separate lives will kindle one flame. Witness the mystery of this hour. Ours in this light appear all the same. Gather in peace, gather in thanks, gather in sympathy now and then. Gather in hope, compassion, and strength. Gather to celebrate once again. Gather the spirit of heart and mind. Seeds for the sowing are laid in store. Nurtured in love and conscience refined, with body and spirit united once more. Gather in peace, gather in thanks, gather in sympathy now and then. Gather in hope, compassion, and strength. Gather to celebrate once again. Gather the Spirit growing in all, drawn by the moon and fed by the sun. Winter to spring and summer to fall, the chorus of life resounding as one. Gather in peace, gather in thanks, gather in sympathy now and then. Gather in hope, compassion, and strength. Gather to celebrate once again. Thank you. Please be seated.
Good morning. My opening words this morning are from Christine Robinson. May our time here together lead us to the heart of the season, which is peace. May we breathe deeply of peace in this quiet place, relax into its warmth, and know we are safe, and open our hearts to the well-known Christmas story. Like the wandering couple, may we find that our greatest trials issue forth from our greatest hopes. Like the harried innkeeper, may we find ways of being a help to others. Like the lumbering beasts, may we be silent witnesses to the unfathomable glory of life. Like the shepherds on the hill, may we know that we need never be afraid, for we are not alone. And like the journeying wise men, may we always have the courage to follow our star. And like the angels, may we cry peace to a troubled world. Come, let us worship together. Now, if you'll join me as we light the chalice, say our chalice lighting words together. We kindle this flame, symbol of our faith, for the light of truth, the mirth of community, and the fire of love, which calls us to work for justice.
Good morning. I'm Melanie Clunan-Schulte. I'll be your worship associate this morning, and I'm so honored to welcome all of you to Valley Unitarian Universalist Congregation, where friendships are real, not virtual, where Black Lives Matter, where there are no stupid questions, where there is a diversity of opinion but not of fact. If you've ever, you can clap. If you've ever watched Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer and identified with the misfit toys, don't worry, you are welcome here. We always love to welcome our visitors. If we have any guests visiting us today for the first or second time, would you have the courage to please rise now so we can greet you? Yay! Well, welcome, Sandy. Please join us for refreshments after the service, and there's also a welcome circle that's by the back windows if you want to hear more about us, so welcome. And for all of us, if you're dealing with something right now and you could use someone to listen or to point you towards some resources, we are so lucky in this congregation that we always have a lay pastoral care associate available after the service, usually here at the front of the sanctuary, and today that is Dan Schulte. Dan? Well, in place of Reverend Andy today, we are lucky to have our own Rebecca Riggs in the pulpit. Rebecca's sermons are always full of authenticity and insight, so I am looking forward to that. And our theme for this month is compassion. Compassion seems like such a sweet and gentle word, doesn't it? Sort of conjures up images of Mother Teresa and feeding stray kittens. But I think compassion takes grit. And I was reminded not that long ago that it can involve difficult conversations. A few weeks ago, the father of a friend of our family died, and the friend's daughter, not long after that, was spending the day with our family. During a quiet moment, I took the opportunity to tell her how sorry I was that her grandfather had died and how much I had liked him. My daughter was horrified. I can't believe you brought up her dead grandfather and then talked about how it made you feel bad. I was reminded of a time when I was about my daughter's age at a family reunion when I had overheard my favorite aunt go up to a cousin of hers that I didn't know, whose child had since died, and tell him how she remembered watching the child play at the previous family reunion. I was just as horrified as my daughter. You don't bring up people's dead child, you might make them sad, is what I thought. But I was astonished to hear the cousin profusely thank her, talk about how grateful he was that someone remembered his child and was talking to him about it. And that's always stuck with me. And so I explained to my daughter that often when we lose someone we love, it's comforting to know that other people miss them too, and to have an opportunity to talk about them. A few weeks after that, we were visiting another friend who has no children and had recently installed a new pool. These friends encouraged our children to go make use of that pool while the adults talked. But my son, who's 8 and is a little bit slow to warm up sometimes, wanted to sit and hang out with the adults. My friend is African American, and we were discussing race, as we often do. But after about 30 minutes, my son piped up, "Can we all just go swimming instead of having this racist talk?" I explained to him that merely discussing race wasn't being racist. But it's not just children that shy away from bringing up dead loved ones to the bereaved or to discussing race and thinking that, I might get called out as being racist. Whenever we're faced with difficult conversations, we're not really sure how what we say might be received, and it's easier to offer trite platitudes as condolences or to pretend that we don't see race. I think our theme this month calls on us to do more. I think it calls on us to enter into those difficult conversations when doing so is the way to have a real connection. Compassion, after all, as my favorite Buddhist author, Pema Chodron, points out, is not pity for those that are lesser than us. It's a relationship of equals, of greeting each other, as the philosopher Schopenhauer said, as fellow sufferers. And therefore, compassion is not a one-way street. It's meant to be like the gifts that we exchange at this time of year, both graciously given and graciously received.
And now let us sing together again. Please rise as you are able. I've got peace like a river. I've got peace like a river. I've got peace like a river in my soul. I've got peace like a river. I've got peace like a river. I've got peace like a river in my soul. I've got joy like a fountain. I've got joy like a fountain. I've got joy like a fountain in my soul. I've got joy like a fountain. I've got joy like a fountain. I've got joy like a fountain in my soul. I've got love like an ocean. I've got love like an ocean. I've got love like an ocean in my soul. I've got love like an ocean. I've got love like an ocean. I've got love like an ocean in my soul. I've got pain like an arrow. I've got pain like an arrow. I've got pain like an arrow in my soul. I've got pain like an arrow. I've got pain like an arrow. I've got pain like an arrow in my soul. I've got tears like the raindrops. I've got tears like the raindrops. I've got tears like the raindrops in my soul. I've got tears like the raindrops. I've got tears like the raindrops. I've got tears like the raindrops in my soul. I've got strength like a mountain. I've got strength like a mountain. I've got strength like a mountain in my soul. I've got strength like a mountain. I've got strength like a mountain. I've got strength like a mountain in my soul. Thank you. Please be seated.
And as the ushers come forward to receive the offering, we're reminded that our generosity funds the mission of this congregation. It keeps the lights and the heat on. It allows us to do our social justice work and to continue our religious education programs. And so if you haven't yet made your pledge, I'd like to remind everybody that it's that time of year, and there are some packets, I'm told, in the back. And we're also reminded of all the contributions that don't go into the plate. Contributions of time and of talent, of endowments, of mentoring our youth. And so we are grateful for the many gifts that each of you contribute to this congregation.
This is the usual space in our service where we do the Time for All Ages. But this morning, again, our kids are over in the RE complex rehearsing for next week's service. But it struck me that just because they're out of sight doesn't mean they should be out of mind. So I'm including a Time for All Ages. We're all ages, right? And what I want to do with you is share an affirmation of children that I found and dedicate it to all the youth here at Valley UU. We're going to read it responsively. I get to start. To our children at Valley UU, you matter. There is no one like you and never will be again. From the birth of the earth to its outermost end, you, an eager shout. We'll straighten it out. Your breath. You, she, he, we, they, you are whole and okay, gracefully teaching your truth and your way. You cannot be forgotten. We cherish you so. Your voice and your hands can do more than you know. You see old things anew. You turn them and test them. Your wonder exhausts our old words to express them. You speak up and lay bare. You upend every rock and pursue every glimmer and give a new name to each sparkle and shimmer. You chart out new paths, go beyond our horizons. New friendships, new stories, your hope always rising. You, welcome and wanted, whatever your skin, wherever the neighborhood you were born in. You play across fences that keep us divided. Old walls become weak when your love is ignited. You call us to kindness and questions, reminding the life of our living is found in the fire. You, there is no one like you and never will be again from the birth of the earth to its outermost end. You matter, you do. We'll keep learning with you. Now stand on our shoulders, see what you can do. Please come next week when Marcy and all the kids will be back in the sanctuary putting on our annual Christmas pageant. It will probably seem a little chaotic, but remember, these kids are how we see old things anew. Let us never take them for granted. And now I invite you to enter our centering time. As we quiet our inner self, we start with singing O Come, Emmanuel. We will stay seated.
Give comfort to all exiles.
As we open ourselves to the Spirit of life, sometimes an unwanted pessimism makes it difficult to be less than cynical about Christmas. We too have followed stars, but they never lead us to Bethlehem. We have known many wise men, but whose wisdom has faded when tested against our own experiences. Angel voices usually turn out to be singing commercials. The world as created is not the world as we would have it be. And yet, somewhere, a child just drew its first breath, and the parents share in that primal joy of new life. Somewhere, someone has given a gift where there was no expectation of giving or receiving. Somewhere, forgiveness has led to reconciliation. This is our world. Let us have the courage to accept it, the grace to embrace it, the will to love it. Help us to appreciate and expand the moments of joy in life whenever they come. Let such moments bring hope so that we can push back times of darkness with the flame that is our faith. Now may we sit for a moment with all that is our lives and find the grace in our living. My first reading this morning is called Annunciation to the Shepherds, written by Lynn Unger. It's hard not to laugh. What a picture it makes. The dumbfounded shepherds and the stricken sheep, the cacophony of bleating and the barking of sheepdogs dashing and nipping in a vain attempt at order. And over it all, the angels trying to make their shimmering voices heard. A who? Wrapped in what? The shepherds holler back. Where are we supposed to go? Poor guys. They wanted directions, a purpose, some sense of how the story might end. And all they got, all any of us ever get, was the sound of angels somewhere beyond the din singing, Glory, Hosanna, across the improbable night. And now, please join in singing, Angels we have heard on high. Please rise.
Angels we have heard on high, sweetly singing o'er the plains, and the mountains in reply, echoing their joyous strains. Gloria in excelsis Deo, Gloria in excelsis Deo. Shepherds, why this jubilee? Why these songs of happy cheer? What great brightness did you see? What glad tidings did you hear? Gloria in excelsis Deo, Gloria in excelsis Deo. Please be seated.
My second reading is titled A Rose in the Snow by Jane Ellen Malden. The year my brother died, my family tried to pretend our sorrow wasn't real, and we kept to all our regular Christmas traditions. Although we were crazed with grief, we tried to fake it, and were all miserable. Later, when my father died, my mother decided that we should take a trip for the holidays instead of staying home and being overwhelmed by memories. But it won't be like Christmas, my younger teenage brother said. It can never be like it has been before, replied my mother. So Concord, Massachusetts was our destination. We checked into historic Concord Inn on the public square and spent 3 days exploring the wintry village. We walked across the bridge from which the shot was fired that was heard round the world. We discovered paths in the snow around Emerson's house and the Alcott house. We slid across the ice on Walden Pond. It was a wonderful adventure, but at the same time, we were not happy. We spent Christmas Eve in the inn's pub, and I was not alone in being the only one to cry myself to sleep that night. Early on Christmas morning, my mother and I rose at dawn. Leaving my brother asleep, we slipped out for a walk. It was a frosty but clear morning. A fresh layer of snow had utterly muffled the town. For deep, unspoken reasons, we headed up a hill to the old cemetery where many great authors and American leaders were buried. We were looking for the grave of the poet Henry David Thoreau. The dirt walkway up the hill was quite steep and coated with ice. We pulled ourselves up, hand over hand, using the iron handrail. As we reached the top, the steam of our breaths appeared to be the only lively warmth in the chilly pink dawn. After a search, we spied Thoreau's grave, a large tombstone cresting out of a snowdrift. And there, to our astonishment and joy, lay a single red rose. No one was in sight, but some lone soul had made his or her pilgrimage in the first light of Christmas Day to salute this free spirit. My family no longer does Christmas as we once did. Each year is now unique, and I like it that way. I have fewer expectations of Christmas and enjoy myself more. I live less in the past and try to appreciate life in the here and now. Let go of what Christmas should be and try to live it in your own way. You may find joy where you least expect it. Maybe a red rose in the snow. Our reading this morning focused on those who found the red rose in the snow. The story ends somewhat abruptly, it seems to me, leaving us to intuit what finding that rose at that place, at that time, meant for them. It was a gift of hope when they least expected it and most needed it. I think it might have empowered them to make changes in their lives, or maybe it helped them to decide to go on at all. But now, I want you to imagine yourself as the mystery rose giver. Imagine with me. It's cold. You pull yourself up hand over hand, the same icy slope. Tender rose gently held and protected somehow. Cold and alone, the crunch of snow the only sound. The sky just beginning to turn a faint shade of pink as dawn begins to open the sky. It's not an easy hike, but the power of the pilgrimage is such that step by step up the steep hill, you are still smiling. It's no coincidence that it's to Thoreau's grave we are going. He was an unattractive man who died young and childless and had no particular fame during his lifetime. He worked primarily at his family's pencil factory, where the graphite dust worked its way into his lungs, slowly killing him. A man who, nevertheless, strove to live a life true to his spirit and who left behind an incredible legacy of wisdom and beauty. Henry David Thoreau is probably about as close as you get to a UU saint. In his story, there is no martyrdom or miracle beyond the ordinary martyrdom of a scholar and poet and the ordinary miracle of words so powerful they come alive on the page. His lasting legacy lives in those words he wrote, words of such beauty and truth that they still have the power to touch souls all these years later. Listen to his words from an excerpt from the poem Friendship. I think a while of love, and while I think love is to me a world, soul meat and sweetest drink and close connecting link between heaven and earth, I only know it is, not how or why, my greatest happiness. However hard I try, not if I were to die, can I explain it. A man may love the truth and practice it. Beauty he may admire, goodness not omit as much as may be fit to reverence. But only when these three together meet, as they always incline, to make one soul the seat and favorite retreat of loveliness and love. In such case only doth man fully prove, fully as man can do, what power there is in love, his inmost soul to move resistlessly. Perhaps if it were I on that cold, snowy morning, these words by Thoreau would be the ones ringing in my heart as I gently set down the rose in front of the headstone. As I lay down this one precious rose, blood red in the snow, I offer thanks for Thoreau and his words, and thanks for the precious gift of life, for the ability to think and read and be enlightened, for the ability to love. And I make a promise in that moment that I, too, will try to live a life in which the power of love and loveliness moves my soul without resistance. Leaving the rose with a moment of gratitude and perhaps a prayer for courage to face the darkness in my own life, the pilgrimage over, I turn back and head home, never knowing that a few hours later, people would come in pain, weighed down with grief, in need of healing, and would find that one perfect rose lying there in the snow. And somehow they would understand in a deep and primal way that life matters, love matters, and that mortality makes the gift of life all the sweeter. What a gift. that moment of deep healing, of seeing there in the snow proof that a life lived for love and loveliness has not been lived in vain. There are those in this world who would try to convince us that the power of the Christmas story grows out of the fact that it definitively proves Jesus of Nazareth's special and unique status as the Savior of humanity. They are likely the same people who will try to convince you that the meaning of Easter lies in the promise of heaven to true believers. I believe they've missed the real point. The power of Easter is that it shows that a life lived with love, no matter if it's cut brutally short, leaves behind a powerful legacy in the people who have been loved so fully. And the power of Christmas? The power of the Christmas story lies not in the divinity of the infant Jesus, but in his humanity. This wonderful story with confused shepherds and smelly stable, the mysterious astrologers from Persia